This is Taiwan, an island located in the western Pacific Ocean, with the southeastern coast of mainland China. The main island covers approximately 5,000 square kilometers. For comparison, the Netherlands is slightly bigger. Although it is not that big in size, this island has been a game changer in modern geopolitics, and also the biggest eyesore to its close neighbor China. To understand why China does not even like this tiny island there, and most recently how Taiwan ended up in the headest of one of the strongest countries on earth, which has nuclear weapons by the way, we need to go back in time more than a century ago. The Qing dynasty fell in 1911, and warlords then controlled different regions from around 1916 onwards. And here where you get to know one of the most influential political figures in modern China and Taiwan, Chiang Kai-shek, the military general that took over the KMT in 1925. The KMT stands for the Kuomintang, and it is the Chinese Nationalist Party. This party wanted to unify China, so the USSR offered aid to both the KMT and the newly formed Chinese Communist Party, CCP for short, and they both formed the First United Front Alliance to fight the warlords in unified China. The campaign they led was successful, and the KMT has most of China under its rule by 1928. But here where things took a turn for the worse, when the KMT decided that the CCP was becoming too powerful. So Chiang Kai-shek turned on them violently in what's called the Shanghai Massacre. An estimated 5 to 10,000 people were killed on just 3 days, and over the next years, the KMT killed 300,000 to 1 million people in anti-communist campaigns, and this has sparked the infamous Chinese Civil War. The KMT was so strong at the time, so Mao Zedong, the leader of the CCP, was forced to retreat to the countryside, and he began building Soviet republics among the peasants. In response to that, the KMT has launched 5 extermination campaigns against the communists from 1930 to 1934, with the 5th one almost wiping all of the CCP. It forced the communists onto the famous Long March in 1934, and over the next year, they marched more than 5,600 miles on brutal terrain to escape KMT forces. The journey was devastating, as only about 1/10 of those who started it survived it. That is a 90% death rate. The remnants finally reached remote Shanxi in China's northwest, where they would regroup and rebuild, but everything came to a stop because of the Japanese invasion of Manchuria in 1931. It seemed like both parties found a mutual enemy, so logically they should put all the differences aside and focus all their forces on the invader. But Chiang remained stubbornly focused on exterminating the communists, viewing them as the greater internal threat. Tensions boiled over in December 1936 during the Jian incident, where warlord Zhang Julian, a KMT ally, frustrated by Chiang's priorities, kidnapped him in Jian and demanded an end to the anti-communist campaigns. After intense negotiations involving CCP envoys, Chiang reluctantly agreed, leading to the formation of the Second United Front in 1937. This alliance has pulled all their forces against Japan, with the CCP's 8th Route Army and new 4th Army integration into the national effort. But trust was paper thin. The KMT feared the communists were using the war to expand their influence through guerrilla tactics in base building in rural areas, while the CCP suspected Chiang of conserving his best troops for a post-war showdown. Skirmishes like the 1941 New 4th Army incident exposed the cracks, where KMT forces ambushed and decimated communist units. Ultimately, the front held just enough to contribute to Japan's defeat in 1945, but it sowed the seeds for the Civil War's brutal resumption. But the US General George Marshall tried to broker a coalition government. Both governments seemed to agree on paper, but neither trusted the other, and thus a full-scale final civil war broke out by the end of 1946, with both parties going in with the intention of being the sole victor of the Civil War that broke out in 1927, almost 2 decades ago. Despite starting with significant advantages, like a larger army, about 4 million troops versus the CCP's 1 million, control over major cities and infrastructure, US military aid, and international recognition, the KMT ultimately lost due to a combination of strategic blunders, internal weaknesses, and the CCP's effective countermeasures. These came into the shape of 3 major decisive campaigns. First, PLA, which stands for the People's Liberation Army, took over Manchuria, eliminating 470,000 KMT troops and securing massive stockpiles, which were left by Japan after its loss in the World War, that included much-needed weapons and ammunition. Second, in 1949 Central China, the PLA surrounded and destroyed 500,000 KMT forces, and shortly after, the last campaign came into the shape of seizure of Beijing and Taijin, forcing KMT retreat to the south. Now, we already said that the KMT had the advantages, but they still lost the war. Well, let me just say that no amount of advantages will help you win the war if you don't get rid of corruption and keep making crucial blunders and not listen to your strategic experts. Because not only the KMT was severely fatigued after going to war with Japan, suffering an estimated 3 million casualties and having their resources severely depleted, corruption among KMT officials was very known to the public, while hyperinflation eroded support from urban middle classes and peasants. In 1948 alone, prices rose 85,000%, soldiers were often unpaid and demoralized, and with all of this, Chiang overextended his forces by trying to hold vast territories and cities, ignoring advice to consolidate consolidate in defensible areas. Poor leadership and intelligence failures compounded this, with the KMT relying on conventional warfare against the CCP's mobile tactic. And because of that, the KMT ultimately lost the civil war and was forced to retreat south after the capital fell in 1949. And Mao Zedong declares the PRC in Beijing on the 1st of October 1949. The war ended with the KMT suffering the heaviest losses, with up to 8 million casualties. The CCP has suffered significantly less, with about 1.8 million casualties, and 2 to 8 million civilians died by the end of the war. And here where Taiwan comes into picture. But first, let's go back a couple of years ago, when Japan surrounded Taiwan due to their loss in World War II, and Taiwan was freed from 50 years of colonial rule, and was returned to the KMT when they still were in power. When Governor Chen Yi arrived with his troops in October 1945, Taiwan officially became a province of the Republic of China. The Taiwanese people initially celebrated after 50 years under Japanese rule. They were finally free, but the euphoria quickly turned into disillusionment, as KMT officials proved corrupt, incompetent, and exploitative, systematically giving jobs to mainlanders over native Taiwanese. The economy collapsed into chaos as hyperinflation took hold, with rice prices soaring 400 times their original value in just 2 years. What had seemed like liberation was becoming a nightmare. And one day, a monopoly bureau agent beat a widow for selling counterfeit cigarettes. A small protest was formed around them, and the agent shot in the crowd and killed a bystander. This was the spark that ignited an island-wide protest in demand for a better government. When things began getting out of control, Governor Chen Yi pretends to negotiate with protest leaders while he secretly requests military reinforcement from mainland China. Keep in mind that this was in 1947, while the civil war on China was on its climax. So the KMT diverted troops from mainland China to massacre the Taiwanese people on what's called as the 228 massacre. They have deliberately targeted the educated elites, such as doctors, lawyers, and engineers, as they were seen as material for a full-scale revolution. A total of 18 to 28,000 of the educated people of Taiwan were killed over the following weeks, and even mentioning the 228 massacre was considered a crime that can get the death penalty over the next decade. Going back to mainland China, the KMT was in full retreat by 1949, as every major city is now falling at the hand of the CCP after they seized control of Beijing in January of the same year. So on May 19, 1949, Taiwan garrison commander Qin Cheng declared martial law, a decision that will shape Taiwan's fate for the next 38 years. Under martial law, all political opposition was banned, press was placed under strict censorship, the constitution was suspended, and civil liberties were eliminated entirely. Citizens could be arrested without warrant, tried in military courts rather than civilians ones, and detained indefinitely without charges. The timing was remarkable. This happened before the KMT had even fully lost the mainland, revealing the depth of their paranoia. They feared three things: communist infiltration among the refugees and existing population, while the civil war was still raged, Taiwanese independence movements, and the urgent need to transform Taiwan into an impregnable fire readout. With martial law in place, the White Terror officially began. By the end of 1949, the KMT forces could not hold their ground against the CCPs, and they were forced to retreat to Taiwan in what is known as the Great Retreat. Chiang Kai-shek and approximately 2 million people fled to Taiwan. They brought 774 boxes of gold, cultural artifacts, aircrafts, government institutions, entire military units, and a huge strain was put on Taiwan's economy as the population suddenly increased by 30%, and tensions between mainlanders and native Taiwanese intensified. Now, it is important to note that the KMT sees this as temporary, and they were still planning to retake the mainland, but they could not be more delusional, as the US cut all military support from Taiwan in January 1950. Taiwan appears to be doomed, and everyone expects the PRC invasion by summer. But we all know this is not the end of Taiwan. So stay tuned for the next video to see how Taiwan kept thriving for over half a century, when even survival was almost impossible. Because Taiwan is not just the economic miracle or the country that made computer chip. Its survival is the result of one too many geopolitical accidents.